Thank you so much for joining us live here at Context. Today, the world says its final goodbye to George Floyd, the man at the center of what has become a modern-day civil rights movement. He died just 15 days ago. These are some pictures of yesterday's public viewing in Houston as thousands arrived at the Fountain of Praise Church to pay their last respects to Mr. Floyd, born in North Carolina, raised in Houston, and then moved to Minneapolis to begin a fresh start. By now, we've all seen the video of the incident on May 25th in Minneapolis when 46-year-old George Floyd was arrested by police and pinned down on the ground under the knee of an officer, Officer Derek Chauvin, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as he cried for help, even crying for his mother, who had passed away just 2 years ago. Floyd later lost consciousness and died. 4 officers, as we know now, were dismissed right after that incident. And the incident has created international outcry as many across America and eventually the world took to the streets demanding justice for Floyd and the many others who have died at the hands of police, starting a conversation about racism in the US, but also definitely here, as you can see visuals of crowds in our own country as they have raised awareness of racism even here in Canada. As we now know, former officer Derek Chauvin, who made his first appearance in court yesterday, was initially charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Last week, prosecutors added the more serious second-degree murder charge, and the other 3 now former officers were also arrested and have been charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. But today is a day about Mr. Floyd and celebrating his life. We are joined right now live in Houston with Doug Stringer. He is the founder and president of Somebody Cares America and Somebody Cares International. He was at the visitation yesterday. We're seeing live images right now of the memorial service that is taking place in Houston. Let's bring in Doug right now. Thanks so much for joining us, Doug.
It's great to be here with you.
Now, you have lived in Houston. You know the pastors of the Fountain of Praise Church. You were down at the visitation paying your respects to the family. What was it like being at the visitation yesterday, Doug?
Yes, we spent a few hours there. It was from noon to 6 p.m. Houston time, and a lot of people. The lines, it was very, very well organized. There was a lot of people that were coming to show their respects from all different backgrounds, denominations, ethnicities, which was a beautiful sight. And regardless of people's political positions or their personal opinions, it was a moment to show their respects for for George Floyd's family and to the community, showing their solidarity that there needs to be change and that we need to do this together.
As you heard of George Floyd's murder just again 2 weeks ago, what were the thoughts going through your mind, Doug? He, raised in Houston, from Houston. What were some of your personal thoughts as you saw this unfold?
Well, for all of us, I think we all were extremely devastated and heartbroken by the optics of what actually took place, and seeing him, as you said, over 8 minutes, over almost 9 minutes of having a knee into his neck, and even crying out, saying, "I can't breathe," and then crying out to his mother twice. And so it was very heartbreaking. And it took me back when I found out that he was actually, although born in North Carolina, was raised in Houston in the 3rd Ward, where many of us have done a lot of outreaches there. And then I understood that he had done some volunteer work with Church on the Bricks, where he was working with a lot of local ministries, and I think Resurrection Church there, where they were actually working, doing basketball clinics and working with the kids, just being on site, a ministry of presence there. And so that really took me back to a lot of memories of those kinds of outreaches, and then wondering what the journey had become to the point that we hit this tragedy that took place. But I believe the narrative has now come with the global response to this, of people recognizing there are systemic issues that need to be dealt with. And people talk about justice reform. Well, I was reminded of a reform called the Reform of Josiah in 622 BC, and it was spoken of that reform or change will not just last through the laws. It has to change first with the inward corruption or iniquities of our hearts. And so I think it's exposed a lot of hearts, even those who were not overtly racist or prejudiced, but it's inward corruptions of our heart too. There is covert and overt, and there's a lot of issues I think brought to the surface that we need to intentionally walk through together to deal with them if we're going to see lasting reform and change.
Mm. You spoke yesterday to Houston's chief of police. What did he have to say to you?
Well, he and I have worked together on some previous things and marches, and for the March of Remembrance, recognizing the Holocaust, and he has been very involved in the community and up front and being out there even during the march last week with over 60,000, almost 70,000 peaceful protesters and marchers, and so it was great to see the community, the mayor, the police chief, all of our county leaders coming together and showing solidarity again, regardless of political persuasion, coming together, showing a coat of many colors, so to speak, that we really are together one blood and we need to walk together and really talk about and represent together beyond just walking, that we need to deal with the systemic issues at hand that we is exposed in what we saw. And also, he shared that he really believes that this is a spiritual matter. It has to go deeper than just the optics. And I totally agree with him on that. That this has to get past just the optics and just for the moment. This can't be about a moment only, although it's been catalytic to really honor the legacy of any individual, including, I'm friends with some of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s family, and it's got to get past just talking about it. We have to go back to honoring the legacy of men like that and men and women who've gone before us. And I think this is a moment to leave a lasting legacy, is to continue to address in civil dialogue, but also change that brings lasting reformation. So the police chief, I agree with him when he said this is deeper. It's a spiritual context, and we need to continue to keep speaking into it, and together as a community, bring some change.
Doug, Houston has seen its fair share of innocent Black men who have been killed at the hands of police unjustly. As we look at George Floyd's murder, what do you think is different about this particular incident in this particular time, as we look at how the world is shifting in the conversation about injustice?
Since the advent of social media, I think that there are, again, systemic areas that we've had to deal with, the iniquities of our hearts, the inward corruption of our hearts that is exposed at times like this. It's magnified, pressure magnifies. But I think the optics, again, of seeing it right in front of us, the whole 8+ almost 9 minutes was a wake up call. And for I have friends that saying, well, have all kinds of opinions and saying, well, what about other people that die? It's true, but this is a moment that we have to be careful of how we communicate. It's timing of how we communicate, and I think it's important, especially for me as a minister and working with a coalition of ministers across the country and around the world, that from every background and ethnicity, that we have to, at least in our coming together to become part of something bigger than ourselves, make sure that we're intentional and trying to hear and to be educated. And one of the things I kept hearing yesterday from friends that I saw there, and the pain was real. The pain was real. The need is real, and we need to give this moment for people to share their emotions and the things that's been so suppressed for so long, and finally an opportunity to say enough is enough. And that was one of the things I kept hearing from friends. This is a moment where we can all say enough is enough. And one of the things that Pastor Lawson from Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, who was a civil rights activist, walked with Martin Luther King Jr. He actually said that even the marches back then with Martin Luther King Jr., that what he was moved by, what he saw here even last week, is the 60+ thousand, almost 70,000 walked together. He said this was truly a multicultural, multi-ethnic community coming together, generationally, ethnically, in every way, who actually had an outcry of what they saw. And of course, people try to say all kinds of things, tell stories about, well, what if, but that's not the point. The point is that we saw an injustice in that moment that was lived out with social media, and the optics of this was heartbreaking, heartrending. And I think that just brought to the surface all the suppression, the anger, the frustration, and the pain. And this is a moment where together we can be a healing and hope, a plumb line of healing and hope, if we take this beyond just the conversation and take it to the next level of intentionality to learn from one another, to be intentional with one another. I think that we can start seeing a lasting change.
And as the world right now is looking at Fountain of Praise Church, as we all say our final goodbyes to George Floyd, I know that you are close with the pastors of that church. What was their response as you chatted with them?
Yes, Pastor Remus and Mia Wright have been friends for, I won't say I'll say for how long. We talked yesterday, and we just said, well, a couple of decades. It's been a long time, and since the '90s. And one of the things that Pastor Remus Wright, the senior pastor, and his wife, co-pastor Mia, were talking about with me, is as we were talking, I said it's time that I think all of us have recognized that there are systemic issues and workings of the heart that need to be dealt with. And he said, you said the right word. Once we recognize, or there's a recognition of sin or iniquities, then we can move to a place of really not just remorse because we're sorry we've been caught, but a place of true repentance, a true brokenness of what has happened. And he says, then we can see reformation. And so I interjected, I said, and I think it's also about the intentionality of reconciliation. We can see reformation, but that won't even happen well and last until we have an intentionality of a heartfelt reconciliation. In fact, as a minister, we are called to the ministry of reconciliation. It says, and Paul says in the book of Corinthians. And so it's important that as a pastor, as a spiritual leader, recognize, because I've been here for so long, that it's important that I help to bring healing by walking together, even through our diversities. We're not in uniformity, because uniformity, it looks like clones. It's a unity in our diversity, and being intentional in the dialogue to walk in healing together. And so I do believe that reconciliation and the ministry of reconciliation is an intentionality. We have to do that. And as a Christian, it's a mandate from the Lord to me and to other Christians, that we need to be careful how we speak, and the things that we speak, and the way it's perceived. And even with social media, it's easy to give our 2 cents worth, but it just creates more heartbreak and division. We need to be people who are helping to bring reconciliation and speak healing and hope at a time that the nation and the nations are looking for answers right now. And we need the peace of God, we need the presence of God, but we need to be intentional if we're going to see lasting change, a recognition of the systemic issues, then a place of true repentance, and not just being sorry for being caught, but it's saying we have to really deal with the inward workings of our hearts, and then intentionally be reconcilers, so that we can see lasting reformation, because it won't just come by rhetoric or by just being a good thing to say today. It is an intentionality to keep this message going and working together to see lasting change at every element of our culture.
It starts with us. Well, thank you again, Doug Stringer, founder and president of Somebody Cares America, Somebody Cares International. I know you are heading down to the vicinity of the church where the memorial service is taking part. We know it is a private ceremony with just family and close people that knew George. But thank you so much, Doug, for taking some time out to speak to us today.
Absolutely. And Maggie, thank you for really taking your platform and keeping this awareness, because it's not just a good message. It's a necessity that we truly come together as one blood and walk together in any areas of injustice. And I think it'll encourage you that even last Friday, as I was flying back in Thursday from Columbus, Ohio, doing some things there, meeting with some folks there, and this message is all across the country and around the world. But they'd contact me, would I be willing to help with a communion service for across racial lines, generational lines, denominational lines at City Hall on last Friday. And I was reluctantly going, okay, I don't want this to turn into something besides really bringing light to the systemic issues and injustices, and then pray together. And it was a powerful time to see pastors from every denominational background, ethnicity, coming together at the steps of City Hall and truly bringing light to this issue, dealing with the issues of our own heart, and then also praying together, and then took communion together. I thought it was a
Mm.
powerful time.
That sounds very powerful. Thank you again,
Thank
Doug, for
you.
your time today. And thank you for joining us live here at Context. I'm Maggie John.